number 10 is Maple Hill Cemetery. Founded in 1822, this cemetery is the oldest and largest burial ground in the state, where roughly 80,000 people have been laid to rest. But with that many souls in one place, it only takes a matter of time before people start noticing something strange happening. While during the day, you may be spared from witnessing a horrifying spirit, it's said at night the tortured souls are unearthed, roaming the grounds in search of answers. Most unsettling is the park on the property, also known as the Dead Playground. Oh gee, that sounds inviting, don't you think? Apparently it's nicknamed that as many young people are buried in the area, and visitors brave enough to see for themselves what goes on claim that at night the trapped souls of the young can be seen playing around the park, while their creepy giggles echo throughout the grounds. But whatever you do, make sure you pay respect to Mary Bibb. If you knock on her mausoleum walls, she will reply with a gentle creak of her rocking chair buried inside. But if you forget to greet her, well, she just might haunt you forever. Coming in at number 9 is Fort Morgan. Said to be one of the most haunted places in all of Alabama, Fort Morgan is rife with ghoulish tales of ghosts and strange occurrences. The most notorious is that of a prisoner who's said to have died here in the early 1900s after he took his own life in the barracks. People say that if you walk past, you can still hear him crying out late at night. But he's not the only one you should fear. There's also a female spirit that wanders the grounds in search of justice after she too lost her life after being dragged into the fort and beaten to death by mysterious attackers who were never caught for the crime. Many believe she is an angry spirit with a vengeance who will torture any man who steps foot on the property. So if I were you, I'd skip this one. Next up at number 8 is Drish House. Once the home of Dr. John R. Marsh, a gambler and a drunk who built the estate in 1835 for his beloved bride Sarah. The couple lived in the home for 32 years until one day John had too much to drink for the last time and drunkenly tumbled over the stairway, falling to his demise. But you might be surprised that it's not his spirit that's trapped here, actually his wife Sarah. While no one knows for sure what keeps her soul trapped on the property, some say she was so traumatized after finding her husband dead in their home and wasn't able to recover. Others believe, however, that she refuses to leave because her family failed to honor her own funeral wishes, and so she remains, causing trouble to anyone who steps foot on the property to this day. While today the manor is used for many celebrations, Sarah remains, tormenting guests of the events, trying to get them to leave. If you're brave enough to visit, try looking up at the 3rd story tower. It says you can catch a glimpse of her up there. Just be careful she doesn't see you looking, or she may just follow you around the property, terrorizing you until you leave. Next up at number 7, the Old Bryce Hospital. There are few places in this world more haunted than an old abandoned mental health facility, and there is no denying that the torment that went on here is a huge reason as to why so many spirits remain haunting its grounds, seeking revenge. Built during the segregation era of America, the building was branded as an insane asylum for those suffering from mental illnesses, when in reality it was pretty much a work camp for able-bodied black people who were admitted under false pretenses and then forced into slave labor, working in the fields around the hospital. Shockingly, the facility remained open until 1977 and only closed due to new desegregation laws. It comes as no surprise that after years of abuse and inhumane living conditions suffered by the so-called patients, that people claim to have had strange experiences while visiting. Those who've dared to visit the abandoned hospital claim the souls are angry, and that as soon as you walk in, you can feel the air shift. Many report hearing strange noises, and some even claim to have seen shadowy figures lurking around every corner. Next up at number 6 is St. James Hotel. For whatever reason, hotels tend to be a pretty big hotspot for paranormal encounters, and the St. James Hotel is definitely a part of that phenomenon. Back in the day it was the first hotel operated by a black congressman, and despite having many years of success, it hit hard times in the late 1800s and was eventually forced to close its doors to the public. Fast forward about 100 years to 1997 and the hotel reopened, but this time something was off about the building. Something just wasn't right. During its century-long time as an abandoned building, it became a horrifying hub for lost souls, and I guess they decided to remain, haunting all those that dare stay the night. Visitors claim seeing full-bodied apparitions sitting at the bar, or witness lights shutting off out of nowhere. But most creepy of all was a recorded visit when a psychic research team was brought in, and they walked the grounds asking if anyone was there, but they never heard a response back. But later on, when they played the tapes, an older man's voice responded saying, "Well, that's a stupid question," making everyone in the room jump. So, what do you say? Are you brave enough to pay the ghosts a visit? Coming in at number 5, Cahaba Ghost Town. It likely comes as no surprise that a ghost town is also home to thousands of unsettling spirits. But few are more terrifying than Cahaba. Once the capital city of Alabama, it was abandoned after the Civil War when terrible flooding led to most of the buildings falling into complete disrepair, and so the citizens who survived were forced to leave for good. Today, nothing remains but the ruins of what used to be, including a church, a few cemeteries, and the Barker Mansion and its slave quarters. And I mean, that is just all the ingredients for a haunted ghost town if I've ever heard of one. Those that have tried to visit the once booming city recount that as soon as you enter the town's borders, cell service gets spotty and unreliable, only to be completely fine as soon as you step even 1 foot off the border of the town. While that alone might not scare visitors away, there are also countless reports of visitors witnessing terrifying apparitions and hearing the voices of the dead crying out at night for revenge. So visit at your own risk, but don't say I didn't warn you. Coming in at number 4 is the Boynton Oak. Of all the things that are usually haunted, like cemeteries, hospitals, churches, the last thing you'd likely expect to need to be afraid of was a tree. But trust me, this is no ordinary tree. The Boynton Oak is said to have grown from the grave of one Mr. Charles Boynton. As the legend goes, back in 1835, Charles was accused of friend Nathaniel Frost. Charles disputed the accusation and never once wavered from his alleged innocence. Still, he was found guilty for the crime and sentenced to execution as payback. But right before he was executed, he declared in front of everyone that a tree would spring forth from his grave as a proof of his innocence, and then they would all see that they had caught the wrong man. And shockingly, this is exactly what happened. Many claim that Charles's spirit haunts the tree above his grave, often freaking out those who come to visit. Even spookier is that some claim to have even seen him sitting under the tree waiting. But just who is he waiting for? No one knows exactly. Coming in at number 3 is Sloss Furnaces. Once built as a means to access iron ore, coal, and limestone, the Sloss Furnaces were far from a safe place to work. It's believed over the years at least 47 men lost their lives working at the furnaces due to the incredibly dangerous work conditions. But the most talked about is that of James Slag Wormwood, a former foreman of the furnaces known for being cruel to his employees and who died after slipping and falling into a pool of molten iron ore. Although there is rumor he may have been pushed by his workers, forced to the brink after his unending abuse. Still, after Wormwood's death, strange things started happening more and more frequently. Workers were seeing strange things, hearing strange noises, and started to feel like they were going crazy. Employees were being found injured or seen tripping and falling out of nowhere. Each of them recounted that an angry man covered in burns had tried to push them after screaming at them to get back to work. Then in 1971, a watchman encountered what he described as a half-man, half-demon who tried to push him up the stairs. After the watchman refused the spirit's advance, he was badly beaten by the entity until he fell unconscious. Later, while being examined, he was found to be covered in severe burns where he says he was beaten. So unless you're looking to be beaten up by an angry spirit and covered in burns from the blows, I might suggest a different place for your visit. Coming in at number 2 is Bear Creek Swamp. Even at the best of times, swamps give off spooky and creepy vibes, and this one might just be the worst of them all. Legend has it that many years ago, a woman's son went missing. Scared, the mother went looking for him in the nearby swamp, hoping that he had simply run away from home. But no matter how long she looked, she could never find him. It said she died in the swamp looking for him, and if you walk into the swamp today and and say, "We have your baby," 3 times, she will come out of nowhere and attack you until you leave for good. And don't even try to come back after she's banished you. You might not be so lucky the second time around. And last up today in our number 1 spot is Sweetwater Mansion. Designed by war vet General John Brahan, this mansion was named after the nearby creek and first occupied by the general's son-in-law, Robert Patton. Under Patton's jurisdiction, the basement of the mansion served as a Civil War hospital and a county jail. And if that wasn't enough, it's said that at one point someone who lived in the mansion practiced dark magic, which thinned the veil between worlds. This would make sense considering just how many people have witnessed earth-shattering apparitions that sent them running for the hills. Most notably is the casket that contains a body of a Confederate soldier in one of the downstairs rooms that will suddenly disappear right in front of your eyes. It's believed that the casket is haunted by the spirit of original owner Robert Patton, whose funeral was held at the home and who was documented having an open casket ceremony. But that's not even the scariest part. There's a room on the property that routinely locks female visitors inside. In fact, it happens so frequently that caretakers of the property have avoided entering it at all costs. And if a self-locking door and a terrifying soldier ghost don't turn you off of the property, there is also a secret room on the property with no door. The only way to enter is by a small window, and it's believed that anyone who goes in will never escape. So if I were you, I'd skip this one.
Kicking off our list at number 10. Room 206. This gives me Stephen King 1408 vibes, and I'm not sure that you're ready. Next time you visit Florida, make sure you read every customer review before you check into a hotel, because some of them might be full of ghosts. That might be a thing that you just might have to deal with. Room 206 at the Super on International Drive. Apparently, it's super haunted. Guests have reported the bed shaking in the middle of the night, probably terrible for your sleep, or freezing cold air even though the AC is turned off. And worst of all, guests have seen their bed look as though somebody was sleeping there moments before, even though it was perfectly made right before they checked in. Can ghosts squat? Is that legal? We've got a couple of spirit squatters in our room. Gotta move. Number 9. Disney on Ice. Many families love to visit Orlando at this time of year. The theme parks there are spectacular, especially Disney World. I went once when I was younger, but I don't recall ever seeing a real life Walt Disney. I don't know. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that he died in 1966. Who knows? But never say never. One of Orlando's oldest tales is that Walt Disney had his body cryogenically frozen after his death. And right now, apparently it's being stored in a bunker underneath the theme park. I mean, that's a bit more creative than being cremated. I'll give him that. It's pretty Walt Disney of him just to freeze himself forever. A grad from the University of Central Florida Film School, Benjamin Lancaster, they actually made a film about this whole idea. It's called The Further Adventures of Walt's Frozen Head. That's a family classic, some would say. Number 8. Scarlett O'Hara's. You're gonna need 2 pieces of ID for this next one, alright? Perhaps the most haunted bar in Florida, located in St. Augustine, Scarlett O'Hara's is haunted by a past owner. Many believe that spirit likes to make itself known to guests. That's always fun. Try and go grab a pint and now you got a ghoul in front of you. That spirit is one of George Coley. Now George sadly bit the bullet one night when he was in his bathtub, so now we have a series of unexplainable events. Plates and glasses will sometimes move across the bar on their own, and the jukebox keeps playing Help Me Rhonda even when it's unplugged. So that's absolutely terrifying. If you want to check it out now, be warned, because it's a full-on tourist attraction at this point. But if you go, you can pose alongside the same bathtub that George Coley died in. Yeah, how lovely is that? Are we going to Disney World? Nah, even better, Scarlett O'Hara's. Yeah, you're gonna love it. Number 7, Stranahan House. You don't want to be stranded at the Stranahan House. It's gonna be bad news. Fort Lauderdale has a few haunted hidden gems, and the oldest house just happens to be the most haunted. What do you know? What odds are that? What odds are that? What are those odds? There we go. The house's OG owner was Frank Stranahan, and today, if you visit ye old stomping grounds, well, you might catch Frank in a photo or two. It's said that Frank still oversees the place, and he regularly shows up in guests' photos. So this ghost likes to photobomb. That's pretty amazing. I kinda like that. I suppose being trapped in the same house for all of eternity It probably gets a little boring from time to time. Just to pop into a photo, throw some peace signs up, and then disappear back into the walls. Ivy Stranahan, Frank's late wife, she also has made an appearance or two. Nice. True love is haunting the same house forever. Guests have felt a cold hand on their shoulder, and her perfume still lingers in the hallway. Must have been some good, strong stuff. Nice. Now, it's not all fun and games. Augustus Stranahan, aka Frank's father, well, his ghost likes to throw books. It's really aggressive, so heads up for that, I guess, if you go. Cheers. Number 6, the Plaza Resort and Spa. Ah, yes, kick back and relax with ghosts. It's just what you want. You're never alone, I guess. That's a plus side. The Plaza Resort and Spa sounds like a relaxing getaway until you start looking up footage of the actual resort. One's gonna get your attention for sure. Back in August 2013, security cameras captured late night footage of this shape-shifting ghost, some sort of spirit, some scary blob. It's bad news, really, in any regard. What happened was the original building was destroyed by fire in 1909, and current staff will testify that they've seen the ghosts of victims caught in that blaze. How they know? I have no idea, but apparently they do know. It's a lot of details for one ghost appearance. One of the most common sightings includes a woman whose spirit is known to mess with the elevators and make items in the kitchen disappear. Okay, really? That last one's for sure an employee stealing food. He's like, oh yeah, I don't know. I think a ghost ate that cheesecake, boss. I don't know, spooky stuff, spooky. Number 5, the Blue Anchor Pub. Another bar, another haunted bill to pay. Here we go, debit or credit. Heading over to Delray Beach, the Blue Anchor Pub was built in 1840s in London, but the wooden interior was sent to New York City and then later on sent to Florida in 1996. So yeah, these spirits must be confused. They go from Jack the Ripper to some dude wearing a Yankees hat talking to a TV. Trapped in the wooden interior is the ghost of one Bertha Starkey, who was sadly killed by her husband back in the 1840s. Now, you know Bertha is lurking about when you hear rattling pots in the kitchen, and sometimes if you're really unlucky, you'll hear wailing in the middle of the night. Nice. Again, horrible sleep at this place. The Blue Anchor sounds like a really relaxing time, but every night at 10 o'clock, the current owners will blast a ship horn to scare away her spirit. I don't know, I feel like blaring a ship horn at 10 p.m. is more jarring than some pots and pans moving sometimes. You know what I mean? I'd rather hear the pots and pans than in the middle of the night. No way. Number 4, the Biltmore Hotel. Another hotel to avoid at all costs. Awesome, we love these ones. First of all, do you actually like staying at a hotel? Some people love it. Some people find it super relaxing. I can't help but think about what went on in the bed before me. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, why does this part of the bed feel a little bit caved in? What's going on here? Every time I'm in a hotel, I have the worst dreams and I can't sleep at all. The Biltmore Hotel in the city of Coral Gables is also one of the most haunted hotels in Florida. You've probably heard of this at some point. It all started in 1926 during initial construction. The Biltmore witnessed a foul killing on the 13th floor. The 13th floor of all floors, my God. The Biltmore was also turned into a military hotel during World War II before ultimately being closed and then abandoned later in 1968. Now, the city renovated the hotel later on in the 80s, but it didn't take long for ghost stories to start to spread. It's horrible, horrible past, I mean, more than fair. Now, of course, the most activity is on the 13th floor, so if you do check this one out, really double down. Go to the haunted floor, you know? Don't just look outside and then book. Go in, stay a night. I can't believe some buildings don't have a 13th floor. Can you imagine that? Well, they do, but everyone pretends that they don't. You know what I mean? They're like, yeah, it's 12. I don't know, we'll see. Are you a 13th floor believer? Comment down below. Me personally, I don't think so. Because it's the 14th, or the 12th, or the 13th. I don't know anymore. No one knows anymore. It goes 11, 12, 14. You're like, really? What's the 14s? We know what's going on here, come on. Number 3, Tampa Theater. If you're a fellow theater kid, you're also gonna love this one. Here we go. Tampa Theater opened up in 1926. The theater is now said, of course, to be haunted by a woman that was struck and killed by a carriage on the property. Imagine being hit by a carriage. It's so slow. This was actually before the theater was built, so her spirit has been there for a while. If you go to Tampa Theater today, you might catch a glimpse of that woman in a white gown walking across the mezzanine hallway. This time without carriages whipping through, hopefully, sans carriage. Imagine telling somebody in front of you to sit down during a show, then they just disappear. You're like, I think that was a ghost. I think that was probably a ghost. It says in the playbill, ghost, so maybe that was her. Tampa Theater, of course, has leaned into these claims. Now they offer Ghosts of Tampa Theater Tour, where guests can learn about its haunted history. I'd love to do this tour. I don't know, maybe I'll go to Florida. Who knows? I won't. I'm like, I'm probably not going to. Number 2, Key West Cemetery. A cemetery that's haunted Get out of town. You don't say. The beachside cemetery was built in 1847. Now, it was built specifically for victims of a hurricane that occurred a year prior in 1846. That's terrible. Now, the cemetery is the final resting place for roughly 80,000 to 100,000 people. So yeah, I can only assume there's a ghost or two hanging out. That's extremely tragic. Walking through a graveyard at night is scary enough anytime, but Key West Cemetery is so specific that the entire time you're walking through, you feel connected in a way. Now, me personally, I'm all set. I don't want to feel connected to an 1846 tragedy. I'm all set. I'll go the long way around the cemetery, then I'll meet you on the other side, if anything. But if you're into this kind of thing, they also offer ghost tours, so knock yourself out. There you go. Apparently, it's too scary for children, so that's a plus. Lines will be a little shorter than usual. And finally, number 1, St. Augustine Lighthouse. A scary lighthouse? How? How is that possible? The St. Augustine Lighthouse is located, of course, in Florida and was built between 1871 and 1874. And it's considered Florida's first official lighthouse ever. Imagine that. Boom, let there be light. Hey, I made you a lighthouse. Enjoy, we're all good now. There have been several tragic events over the following years, seeing as it's the first lighthouse ever. Seen a lot of history. But even during initial construction, there were several freak accidents on site. Today, said spirits are still lurking about. Sightings of shadowy figures are common, but just one time, somebody saw a hand coming through the tower door. Yeah, a floaty hand, like from Idle Hands. How terrifying is that? Can you imagine just a Smash Bros hand just lurking near you? Several guests have reported furniture also moving around on its own, which is definitely a hazard. And one person even said that they had some of their arm hairs plucked off of them while they were in the basement. Probably that floaty weird hand just doink. Give me one of those. Another guest felt someone grab their ankle at one point while walking down a hallway, which actually caused them to trip and fall down, so something's going on. I don't know what this ghost hand wants, but it's pretty chaotic to me, it seems.
Number 10, White Rock Lake. White Rock Lake is an area that is filled with many legends. It's home to the ghost of the Lady of the Lake. Years ago, a young couple was driving home from a party along the lake late one night. The two were tired and ready to go home when the wife suddenly screamed at her husband to stop the car. A young woman in a long white gown had appeared in the road before them. The couple asked the woman if she needed a ride and she accepted. They drove on, and all while the wife could hear the steady drip, drip, drip of water. But once they reached the address the woman had given them, they turned around to find her gone, leaving behind only a puddle. Confused, the couple got out at the address and knocked on the door. An elderly man answered. They told the man about the young woman they had just picked up, and he sighed and told them they were not the first couple to come knocking on his door late at night. The woman they had picked up was his daughter, who had drowned in White Rock Lake 10 years earlier. The Lady of the Lake has been spotted and even picked up many times since, and continues to haunt White Rock Lake in her white gown, looking for a way back home, and this is just sad. Number 9, Adolphus Hotel. The Adolphus Hotel was built on the former site of Dallas's original city hall in 1912, and the hotel has a reputation as one of the city's most prominent historical landmarks. In addition to being the oldest hotel in the city, it's no surprise it's also among the most haunted. One of the most famous spirits here is an apparition who appears in a 1930s era white wedding gown, the spirit of a jilted bride who was supposed to have been married in one of the hotel's glamorous ballrooms on the 19th floor, but ended up taking her own life at the hotel instead when her groom left her at the altar. Ever since that night, guests staying on the 19th floor report hearing a woman crying, footsteps running up and down the hall, and even the sound of rope creaking under the strain of a body. The bride spirit has been spotted wandering the halls after events and parties, still wearing her white dress and veil. Again, this is just incredibly sad. Staff and guests of the hotel also report an eerie feeling of being watched or of a presence in the room with them. Now, not all ghost residents have sad backstories, as many are believed to be former guests who checked in again during the afterlife because they had such a good time in the hotel back in their days among the living. Guess it's a cool place to be in life and death. Number 8, the Coombs Creek Trail. Located in Oak Cliff, this trail offers a serene, scenic path along Coombs Creek for nature lovers to enjoy, but But everything is not as it seems, as this trail has an eerie history. Years ago, a young girl named Mary would ride her bike every day along the trail, but one day Mary never returned home. It's still unknown whether Mary drowned in the creek, was struck by a passing train, or was taken, but she seems to have disappeared without a trace. Hikers still report seeing the figure of a young girl riding her bike dangerously close to the edge of the water, but when they call out to warn her, she vanishes into thin air. Others have reported seeing a small ghostly face of a young girl peeking at them from behind a tree. When they try to move closer to investigate, the face disappears. Then the face reappears further along the trail, inviting the hiker to follow her deeper and deeper into the woods. And if a ghost child is trying to get me to go deeper in the woods, I'm just gonna turn around and leave. Number 7. The Majestic Theater. The Majestic Theater is located on Elm Street in downtown Dallas. Elm Street? No, I've seen that movie before. Now, in the 1910s, it housed live vaudevillian performances before transitioning to screening films in 1922. The Majestic remained in business until the 1970s, and then its doors were reopened for live performances in 1983 after it landed on the National Register of Historic Places. Some say the theater's original owner, Carl Hopitzel, still haunts the building, making sure things run according to his liking. One former employee claims he shared an office space with Carl during his time there. He reports that one of his responsibilities each night was to ensure that the door in his office leading to the theater was locked, but each morning when he showed up for work, the door was wide open, and a strange chill would permeate from the room. When he mentioned this to his manager, he laughed and explained that this was only Carl, who liked to use the door to get into the theater and check up on things. Weird smells, stage props inexplicably moving, and a light hanging above the balcony illuminating on its own have all been attributed to Carl. His spirit is rumored to linger there to this day, making sure his theater runs smoothly and maybe catching a show or two. Number 6. Snuffers Restaurant on Greenville Avenue. Snuffers is a popular local chain that serves classic American food, or at least that's what it says when I Google it. But the location on Greenville Avenue serves up a lot more than just burgers. Customers and staff of the Dallas restaurant claim that the place is seriously haunted. Before Snuffers, there was an easy parlor. It seems that a man was badly injured after hours when a fight broke out at an employee party. He then stumbled into the bathroom where he drew his final breaths. Years later, once Easy Parlor became Snuffers, the managers would sit at a table by the bathrooms each night to finish up closing paperwork. As they sat in the dark, near-empty restaurant, they would listen as antagonized, stumbling footsteps made their way to the bathroom, then watch as the door creaked open by itself and never shut. In 2013, the original building was demolished and reconstructed, but reports of strange happenings didn't stop. Other employees have since reported feeling cold gusts of wind rush by them and doors slamming shut all on their own. Sounds like a dinner and a show to me. Number 5. Flagpole Hill. Just adjacent to White Rock Lake is a road leading to the infamous Flagpole Hill, the rumored location of a band of rock-hurdling poltergeists. Yep, you heard that right, they just throw rocks at you. Passerbys report driving through the area late at night only to be pelted by a rain of pebbles. When they got out of the car to chase down the culprits, there were none to be found. Local legend identifies the ghost as 3 restless spirits tangled in the dark history of the area. According to the story, a construction worker ended their own life in the house on Flagpole Hill before its completion, and a hired hitman was later convicted of taking out the couple who occupied it. Now, don't think just because you're not in a car, you're safe. Those walking on foot rather than driving past seem to be just as unlucky. Hikers and other residents of the area have reported an unseen assailant pelting them with rocks as they pass by. Sounds like this place really rocks. Get it? Because so funny. Number 4. The Miller Moore Mansion. Located in Dallas Heritage Village is Miller Moore Mansion. It was completed in 1857 and was the home of William Brown Miller, who served in the Confederate Army. This beautiful home is said to be haunted by an unidentified lady ghost who always seems to lurk near the nursery. Now, the general belief of who the lady is the spirit of a woman named Emma. Now, Emma was the 3rd wife of William Brown Miller, and allegedly everyone who encounters Emma tells a similar story. People see a woman going up the stairs and they describe the same woman always wearing a long brown dress. guests. She has been seen in the front foyer, and people claim to have seen her in the middle window where the nursery is. Many Millermore visitors have also reported unexplained cold spots and a distinct feeling of being watched during their visit. Seems like Emma is always watching. Number 3. Sons of Herman Hall. Herman Hall's website marks itself as the oldest freestanding wood structure in Dallas, as well as the oldest bar. And for over 100 years, the hall has held concerts, parties, and dances. So no wonder the dead come back there to party. Both staff members and guests of the hall have reported strange occurrences, especially in late hours of the night. Some guests have seen paintings fly off the wall as thrown by some unseen force. Others have heard footsteps in the hallways and seen doors suddenly slam shut. Guests also claim to hear children laughing, even when no children were present, which is just creepy. Longtime staff members of Herman Hall report sensing a lingering presence and seeing flashes of light and shadow. One particular staff member recounts a time he and some other employees saw a couple dressed in Victorian-era clothing walk past them and go upstairs, but about 30 minutes later, when the couple hadn't returned, the staff went upstairs to find all the doors locked and no one inside them. I just think these ghosts want to return to their party days though. Number 2. Goatman's Bridge. Goatman's Bridge, more formally known as the Old Alton Bridge in Argyle. Dating back to the 1930s, locals have told tales of the specter of a strange half-man, half-goat creature lurking beneath the bridge. The Goatman is said to stand over 7 feet tall with big horns and glowing red eyes, which to me just sounds like the devil, but I mean, hey, Goatman is a cool name. Some believe the Goatman remains dormant for years at a time and awakes only to hunt for prey. Now, the Goatman isn't the only spirit on this bridge, as to keep him company is another spirit, that of a young mother crying out eternally for her lost child. Residents making their way over the bridge late at night have reported hearing her ghostly wails. Some say the two ghosts are connected, and that years ago the Goatman stole the young woman's baby. When she found out, she threw herself from the bridge, and her spirit has haunted it ever since. Now, I already don't like bridges because of heights and being over bodies of water, but being on a haunted bridge, no thank you. And coming in at number 1 is Miss Molly's Hotel. Located in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Miss Molly's Hotel is a little deceiving. In the lawless pioneer days of the Old West, Miss Molly's operated as a bordello, making working girls and their customers among the most common apparitions to appear here. One such customer even has a room named after him, the Cowboy Room, where he has been frequently spotted by guests and staff of the hotel. His name is Jake the Cowboy, and when Paula Goins became manager of Miss Molly's, she had no clue that it was haunted. After months, she reported that strange things started happening, and she eventually saw Jake herself. She said, "I saw him in full body. He walked into a room and shut the door behind him, and I went up and knocked on the door and opened the door and no one was there. That is when I knew that something was up, because I'm sitting there thinking, I know I'm not crazy." Another ghost there is assumed to be a former madame by the name of Josie King. Some suspect that she oversaw the house during its bordello days. Josie is seen a lot, usually at 3 a.m. at the foot of the bed, and allegedly Josie likes to watch people sleep. No thanks. Guests can also look at the hotel's collection of creepy photographs or listen to eerie audio recordings captured through the years.
Number 10. Café du Monde. Café du Monde is probably one of the most well-known places on this list, mostly for having what many people say are the best beignets in town. But there can be a problem with the service. No, not from the employees, I'm sure that they're amazing, but apparently some people give their order to a waiter only to never have it arrive, or see the waiter again. Since the restaurant is open 24 hours a day, some customers have seen some freaky things at night, including a ghost waiter who has been haunting the place for decades. No one knows who they might have been, but they must have loved their job a whole lot if they keep coming back to work after they've passed on. Or maybe they worked themselves to death and can't escape the horrors of the night shift. As someone with a lot of restaurant experience, I feel bad for not only the ghostly server, but for the folks who never got their orders. Number 9. The Old French Opera House. Before we move on to number 9, make sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons so that I can keep bringing you the most amazing videos. While it no longer stands today, and many bars and businesses take up the space where it once was, the Witch of the Opera House still lurks in the area of her final resting place. Her story begins in the 1860s. Her name was Marguerite, Marguerite, and she made quite a splash during her debut, but not because she was a good singer. Apparently she wasn't, but it was because of her beauty. After a while, people began to see through her, and they realized that beauty wasn't enough to carry a show, and her career dried up. Financially ruined after losing her career and husband due to a sudden accident, Marguerite decided to fall back and open a bakery. But there was a problem. She couldn't bake. So she sent for the best Parisian pastry chef that she could find, and he came to work for her. And he was pretty easy on the eyes. They fell for each other and they were happy for years. Then one day she heard that her new husband was cheating on her and had a second apartment that they used as a love nest. Enraged, she went to the apartment in the middle of the night, turned on the gas in the fireplace, and left with the gas leaking out. The chef and the mistress suffocated, and Marguerite broke into the opera house and hung herself from the chandelier in her old costume, which she'd stolen from the production. They say that you can still hear her and see her screaming for her lost love in the street where the opera house once stood. Number 8. The Old Absinthe House. It was originally built in 1752, but burned down in the Great Friday Fire of 1788. When it was rebuilt, it became a place for people to meet and discuss less than savory topics, and have some absinthe, a very strong alcohol that was said to have hallucinogenic properties. While many people gathered for drinks here, there was one meeting that took place that was instrumental in American history. According to the legend, in 1815, General Andrew Jackson called for a meeting with someone you wouldn't expect, a notorious pirate by the name of Jean Lafitte. Now, why was a general meeting with a pirate? Well, he needed help with the impending battle with the British for the city, and he knew that Jean knew the city and its surrounding swamps and waters like the back of his hand. In exchange for full pardons, Jackson had Jean's army of pirates released from jail so that they could assist with the war, and they actually helped him turn the tide of what became known as the Battle for New Orleans. Lafitte can still be seen at his favorite spot in the bar on the second floor, wearing his hat and indulging himself with food and drink. Others have spotted the ghosts of Andrew Jackson, as well as Marie Laveau and Madame Lalaurie, both of whom we'll talk about in a little while. With all of these spirits around and reports of slamming doors, footsteps, and flying bottles, I'd stay away from here. In our number 7 spot, we have the Faulkner House. William Faulkner was a Nobel Prize winning author who wrote many amazing works, including The Sound and the Fury and As I Lay Dying. Faulkner moved to this house on Pirates Alley in the 1920s, and it's actually where he wrote his first novel, A Soldier's Pay. The house was bought by a couple in 1990 and turned into a bookstore, but apparently Faulkner never left. Visitors report the smell of pipe smoke, which the author was smoking constantly, while the new owners were not, as well as books falling off the shelves, usually books written by him. I feel like buying a haunted book is just a recipe for trouble, even if it's a classic. Number 6. Le Petit Theatre. Established in 1916, this theater has been the host to many plays and performers over the years, but one has become more infamous than the rest. In 1930s, many plays were coming through, touring the South, and one of them was led by a performer called Caroline. Her last name has been lost to time. Right before a performance, she decided to go for a walk outside on the theater's balcony and tragically fell over the rail and lost her life. Now, visitors of the theater who go stand in the spot she fell from report a sudden drop in temperature and feel a pull towards the edge. Some people also say that they've seen Caroline's reflection in the water of the theater's fountain, still in costume, ready to go on stage. What is it with NOLA and haunted theaters? Number 5. Sultan's Palace. In 1839, Jean-Baptiste Lepret purchased a lavish half-story mansion from a struggling dentist as a new home for his brother, who just so happened to be a sultan from a far-off land. When the sultan arrived by ship, he brought with him a harem of wives, eunuchs, and all sorts of lavish furniture, all of which paraded through the street on their way to the house. Townspeople who lived nearby heard all-night parties and the smell of smoke emanating from within the palace, and were put off that they were never invited. But one day a man was walking by and he saw something shocking. Blood dripping down the front steps and forming a pool in the street. The man fled to a police station to tell them about what he'd found, and when the police arrived, they saw quite a grisly scene. Bodies were lying all over the floor, some with missing limbs, some cut open and broken as though some sort of beast had torn them apart. But the most disturbing find was in the courtyard, where through the wet soil a hand was reaching up, but not moving, as if whoever belonged to it was asking for help after being buried alive. When they dug him up, they recognized him as the Sultan himself. The case was never solved, but it was believed to be the brother's doing that caused the horrors, as his body was never found, and he had the most to gain from the Sultan's death. Number 4. Pharmacy Museum. Now, I know a pharmacy museum doesn't sound that exciting, but stay with me here. In 1823, Louis de Filo, the nation's first licensed pharmacist, opened a pharmacy where the museum now stands, and ran it successfully for years. But in 1855, he sold it to Dr. Joseph Dupas, who lived there until he died of syphilis in 1867. But it seems that he got what he deserved. Dr. Dupas allegedly was performing shocking experiments on pregnant slaves, as well as other horrible things like poisoning with what he told people was medicine. It is said that his spirit is doomed to haunt the museum, where some of the remnants of his grotesque experiments still remain, and visitors have reported seeing him in a brown suit, throwing books, and even pushing people to the ground. He seems like a vengeful spirit, so stay away from here. Number 3. Marie Laveau's house. Marie Laveau is perhaps one of the most well-known and allegedly most powerful voodoo practitioners of all time. Born in 1794, she was the student and successor of Dr. John, a voodoo priest who was supposedly an African prince from Senegal. She would often conduct business in Congo Square, earning the favor of slaves by giving them charms, cures, and even spells in return for information on their masters. She used this information when the masters requested her services to impress them in a simpler way before showing her true power and conducting rituals. The house where she lived was also said to be a meeting place for people, where they performed chants and rituals late into the night. The house was torn down in 1903, but a new structure, which is now a vacation rental, was built on the same foundations, and some say that that's how her spirit still remains in the house. One couple recounted the story of their stay, where late one night they heard chanting and drumming. They checked outside, but there was no one there. And when they realized the sounds were coming from the empty living room, they decided to not sleep there that night. Good call. When they returned the next morning, there was a single pristine feather lying in the middle of the living room, but all of the doors and the windows were locked tight. They checked out immediately and never returned, because to a voodoo practitioner, a feather is good luck, but to an unsuspecting person, it is an omen of death or a hex having been placed upon you. So stay away from here if you don't wish to be cursed. Number 2. St. Louis Cemetery. Number 1. Established in 1789, this cemetery is New Orleans' oldest extant gravesite and is also considered one of the most haunted cemeteries in the US. With over 700 tombs and over 100,000 dead buried here, it makes sense that there would be some spirits that hung around. While most ghosts are said to haunt the places that they died, and not their graves, something about this place draws them in, and there are some very famous ones who reside here. Allegedly, our good friend Marie Laveau is seen here more often than anywhere else, though some claim that she still lives after creating an immortality potion, and she comes here, where her tomb also resides, to communicate with the dead, only to be mistaken for a spirit. It's said that if you place 3 X's on her tomb, your wish will be granted, and if it is, you must return and place a gift, or you will face the consequences. Some people report falling ill here, sudden bruises or cuts appearing, and hearing voices. Other spirits of the cemetery include that of a sailor whose family tomb was sold out from under him while on the high seas, and he's looking for somewhere to rest his soul. And finally, we reach number 1, the house of Madame Delphine Lalaurie. Delphine was a wealthy woman of high stature who married into even more riches and a grand house. She was also played by Kathy Bates in season 3 of American Horror Story. Her and her husband were often heard screaming and arguing all the way from the street, and he eventually left her after finding out some of her dark secrets. Lalaurie was a monstrous woman who performed terrible experiments on slaves that worked in her house, and her world came crashing down when a fire started in her home. When men arrived to put the fire out, they found many horrors in the attic. They found 7 slaves who were suspended by the neck and stretched and bent into horrible positions which they were bound into. Some had pieces of skin flayed off or missing limbs, and one woman had apparently had her bones broken such that she could be fit into a box. Delphine fled the city that night and never returned, but it's said that the ghosts of those who were mutilated there haunt the house looking for their revenge. A man who lived there in the 1900s heard the voices telling him to do horrible things, and eventually he took his own life, proving that the spirits want no one to enter the house where such atrocities happened. While there are many reportedly haunted hotels in Texas, this one seems to top many lists for the most ghostly activity. Most of this seems to stem from the very chilling stories of room 525. In the 1880s, there was a young couple that was having their wedding at the hotel, or at least that was the plan. The groom got cold feet and left the bride at the altar. Now, heartbroken, she ran upstairs to their suite, room 525, and took her own life. And it said she still walks the halls in her long white gown. But that isn't the end of the story, because in 1991, another bride was spurned at the altar, and after going on a shopping spree with the groom's stolen credit card, she too returned to room 525 and took her own life. Since then, guests have seen her carrying a pistol and walking into the room, all without ever opening the door. So don't stay in room 525 or you may never check out. There's also an eerie painting that's said to be inhabited by the spirit of a young girl, the daughter of a senator, whose expression seems to change on its own. People who view the painting have said that they feel like they were floating off of the ground, though they remained on the floor. They also say that their equilibrium and balance was off for a few hours after looking at her. Number 9, USS Lexington, Corpus Christi. Now before I tell you about this spooky ship, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you can catch all of our amazing videos. As a naval vessel that saw actual battle, there have been multiple lives that were lost on board, including that of an engine room operator who still roams the ship at night waiting for the battle to end. The crew of the ship have often reported flickering lights and doors slamming on their own, which, given that this is a very well-maintained historical site, you'd think that they would have found the cause by now. Maybe it's just the ghosts of sailors lost to time. Coming in at number 8, we have the Marfa Lights in, you guessed it, the town of Marfa. While there is so much beauty in the area and plenty of non-spooky reasons to visit, the main tourist attraction to this quaint little town are floating, sourceless lights that seem to change color and even move in the night sky. Many visitors make the journey at all times of year to see the lights, and there's even a yearly festival made in their honor. Reported since 1883 by people of all ages and professions, no one knows what these floating orbs are. They appear at random, but usually in the same area of the sky, and since there's so much open space and low light pollution, it's perfect for stargazing, or seeing spooky orbs, I guess. Some say that these lights are UFOs, some say spirits, and others think that they're just headlights. All that I know is that if I see a mysterious floating orb, I'm going the other way. Number 7, Woman Hollering Creek, San Antonio. Said to be the home of La Llorona, or the Weeping Woman, this creepy creek leaves anyone who visits with a sense of dread. As the story goes, La Llorona was a woman who was distraught that her once doting, affectionate husband left her for another woman. And after confronting him and leaving the confrontation with cuts and bruises, she waded into the water, dressed in her best clothes, and drowned herself in the creek, right after doing the same to the rest of her family. Her chilling screams for her children can be heard all the way from the highway, giving her and the creek its very apt name. Many people have felt themselves being drawn towards the water by ghostly voices, and some have even been tugged towards the bank of the creek. Perhaps it's La Llorona looking for her next victim. The screams heard and feelings of being pulled into the water have mostly been reported by younger people, making this all the more terrifying given what La Llorona did. Number 6, El Paso High School. Now, when you're thinking of haunted places, a school isn't exactly the first place that comes to mind, but this one has quite a story. In 1985, the graduating class received their yearbooks, and when basking in the nostalgia of their group photo, they noticed something odd. A woman who no one could identify was in the picture with them. Now, obviously, that would be quite concerning. I know I'd be freaked out if there was someone I'd never seen before standing next to me in a picture. The blurry apparition still has not been identified to this day, but some think it's a student who fell from a window years before who never got to graduate. I say give her the diploma. She's already in the yearbook. Sticking in El Paso, in our number 5 spot is the Plaza Theater Performing Arts Center. As someone who loves the theater, I try to see as many shows as I can, but I think I'll skip visiting this theater, no matter how good the production is. Built in 1930 as a movie house, demolished for a parking lot in the late 80s, and rebuilt as a live theater space, this building has seen many changes, but some things have stayed constant throughout its history. Many workers of the building have reported seeing a man in one of the box seats, in a tuxedo, smoking a cigarette. One crew member recalls seeing him after turning on the stage lights, sitting alone in the box, as though he'd been there for hours already before the lights came on. And when she saw the smoking man, he turned to her and said, "We all have our time to die. and then threw himself headfirst over the balcony, vanishing before he could hit the ground. A former vice president of the theater also recalls seeing a ghostly girl bouncing a ball in the aisles of the theater and always staring. He also noticed that there was a rag doll that seemed to appear and disappear on its own, moving to locations that it couldn't have without someone's help. Even locked doors didn't seem to stop it from appearing in the projection booth. Number 4. Yorktown Memorial Hospital. Established in 1951, this abandoned hospital has been named one of the most haunted places in America. And since over 2,000 patients are said to have died within its walls before it shuttered its doors in 1992, I can see why. Reports of apparitions of people in hospital gowns running through the corridors or hiding in rooms are numerous, along with moving wheelchairs, disembodied voices, and footsteps. But there are some who have even more chilling stories. While exploring the halls and rooms that have remained largely untouched since its closure, some ghost hunters have been touched, had their clothes tugged on, or even pushed to the ground while being given a ghostly warning. Some of the spirits are believed to be that of patients who had illegal medical experiments performed on them and lost their lives in the process, making for a very vengeful ghost. Number 3. The Screaming Bridge in Arlington. On the night of February 4th, 1961, 6 from the local high school were taking a drive after seeing a movie earlier in the evening. While driving down Bedford Road toward the rail crossing bridge, which had mysteriously been burned down a few years previous, only rebuilt earlier that year, they were startled by another car reversing and honking its horn wildly. This caused the driver to speed up out of fear, and not realizing that the bridge was out, the car careened over the edge and crashed into the other side of the ravine. Unfortunately, 3 of them lost their lives that night, and their screams of terror can still be heard by anyone traveling the renamed Greenbelt Road. The saddest part of this story is that the car that startled them was being driven by a man who had just barely avoided going over the edge of the broken bridge himself, and he was reversing and honking to warn them of the danger ahead. The entire area, now known as Death Crossing, is now blocked off and no traffic travels through. At number 2 on our list, we have La Carafe in Houston. This historic bar, built originally as a bakery in 1860, has been serving patrons for decades, but many come not only for the drinks, but for a paranormal experience. Bartenders and visitors alike have seen apparitions of a hulking man walking upstairs and hearing his giant footsteps pacing the floor. No one knows who this may be, but some say he died there from some nefarious means. The former manager of the bar can also be seen staring out of the top floor window, looking over his patrons and ensuring they're having a good time. And he seems a bit more friendly. However, there are some that report the sounds of a body being dragged across the floor above, but when the sound is followed, nothing's there. Makes you wonder what happened upstairs. And since it's one of the oldest buildings in the city that's been in continuous use, it's become a tourist hotspot and a historical site. Personally, I won't be stopping in for a drink anytime soon, no matter how good the cocktails are. And finally, number 1, the Alamo. While students are taught to remember the Alamo, they don't really teach about all of the spirits who can never forget. In the infamous battle, thousands of soldiers lost their lives, and many were dumped into mass graves and others left to rot out in the sun, so it makes sense that you'd have some pissed off ghosts wandering the ground. There have been countless reports of soldier apparitions walking with weapons in hand, taking their usual patrol, and even full platoons screaming and charging into battle. Even in the afterlife they couldn't get away from war, and so they continue to fight their invisible enemy. There are also accounts of a small blonde-haired boy hiding in multiple places where the gift shop now stands, so make sure to pick up your haunted keychains. While the buildings are beautiful to look at and the area is interesting to explore, the history can leave one with a haunting feeling, and with all those spirits around, I'd be careful touring here, especially at night.
Coming in at number 10, the Devil's Tramping Ground. This scary site is located about 10 miles from Siler City in Chatham County, North Carolina. The Devil's Tramping Ground is a strange footpath that forms a circle 40 feet in diameter. Locals claim that this is where Satan himself walks to contemplate his evil deeds. The path is completely free of vegetation, and the only thing that will grow inside the ring is tough clumps of grass. Apparently even sticks left in the pathway are cleared away by the following morning. There are a few other stories
of where the circle may have come from. Some folks claim that the area was a meeting for Cherokee people who made the circle bear with dances. Others link the site to the lost colony of Roanoke, and scientists have tried to explain it as being a former molasses mill. Whatever you think may be the case, visitors have claimed to see red glowing eyes in the circle. If that doesn't sound evil, I don't know what else could. If it is the devil's place to think, he sure does do a lot of thinking. I wonder why this spot in particular. There is a scenic byway named Devil's Tramping Ground Road, and it's free to travel, but the actual site is currently located on private property. Number 9. Paint Rock. You can find this location near the Tennessee border and the small town of Hot Springs. Paint Rock is considered one of the most haunted places in North Carolina. It has been a landmark for eons, and it features one of the best examples of Native American pictographs in the state. There is a figure of a lone Cherokee man that has been seen walking through the forest near Paint Rock, but that's not the scary part. What makes this one of the most haunted places is more about the famous body of water it overlooks. Legend has it that singing maidens there have lured many men to their demise. These maidens sound like something straight out of Harry Potter, and I'd love to know what it is that lured the men in. Do we think they sang, gave them an offer they couldn't refuse, or did they just put these unlucky men into a trance? So many things I'd love to know about the maidens without going anywhere near the water. You can still visit Paint Rock today and check out the Native American history, but I think I'll stick to Google Images personally. Number 8. Demon Dog. Located in the small Blue Ridge mountain town of Valle Criscus, which is Latin for Valley of the Cross, because the town has two streams that meet at right angles in the middle of the valley. Close by, there's an old stone church that sits near Highway 184. According to the legend, if you drive past the church's graveyard at night, of course it's at night, a black dog will jump out from behind a gravestone and start chasing your car. I don't know about you all, but for me, being chased is immediately 100 times scarier. Apparently, no matter how fast you drive, the dog will keep pace. There are many stories of people being chased by the dog. In some, it has red eyes, in other, it has yellow, but the thing that remains the same in every story is that the only way to get the dog to stop chasing you is if you cross the bridge nearby where the two streams cross. This is not an official tourist attraction like some others on the list, but the cemetery is free to visit in case you wanted to test out the story yourself. At number 7. The Duke Mansion. This terrifying site is located in Charlotte's Myers Park neighborhood. The Duke Mansion was built in 1915 as the home for James Duke of Duke University and Duke Energy. However, the property was briefly owned by John Avery in the 1920s, which is when the paranormal happening reportedly began. The story starts after Avery's wife was hospitalized for severe mental health issues. The lonely John began renting a room to a young writer, Maggie, who he, shocker, ended up falling in love with. However, Avery refused to leave his wife, resulting in Maggie to break off their affair. Before Maggie left, Avery was able to get her to promise to meet him at the home 1 year later, dead or alive. So a year later, Maggie showed up and waited until it was almost midnight when a flash of lightning illuminated a figure of a man watching her from the window, so Maggie rushed in the door. The house appeared to be empty, but she made her way to the library. Just as the clock struck 12, she heard footsteps on the staircase and Avery appeared just in time. As the two reached out for one another, his hand went right through hers. Avery then said, dead or alive. It turned out that Avery had actually passed a few days earlier, and a letter revealed him worried if he would be able to make it to the meeting. Very cute, but still super haunted. Number 6. The Great Dismal Swamp. Just with the name alone, you know this place isn't going to have a nice backstory. The Great Dismal Swamp encompasses more than 100,000 acres straddling the boundary of North Carolina and Virginia. It was home to Native Americans over 13,000 years ago, and George Washington tried to convert the wetlands into farmlands. Though pretty, the swamp is dangerous and spooky. Along with the wild animals, including snakes, the swamp is deep and hard to get out of. Many have drowned in the water, and mysterious lights have been seen in the forest gliding over the water. Hunters have even lost bears and deers, claiming they disappeared without a trace. The most famous tale from the swamp, however, is that of two Native American lovers. The woman passed before they could wed and was buried in the swamp. The man later drowned because he swore he could see his love in a white canoe. Now the pair can reportedly be seen from time to time paddling on Lake Drummond together. It sounds like this swamp holds far more than just a poor couple, and I think I'm okay without knowing. At number 5. Cedar Grove Cemetery. The Cedar Grove Cemetery, located in New Bern, was established in 1800 in response to the yellow fever epidemic, already starting off strong in the creepy department. Apparently, during the epidemic, so many people passed that at night trenches were dug in the churchyard in a line near the adjoining adjoining property, and the bodies were buried there indiscriminately. That sounds like the perfect recipe for a lot of forgotten and angry spirits looking for revenge. Then after 1802, the cemetery became the major New Bern burial ground. Now the cemetery holds North Carolina's most influential citizens from the 19th and 20th century. The thing Cedar Grove may be best known for is the looming black entrance arch. Legend has it that if the arch weeps or bleeds its sticky rust-colored ooze, I have to add that is how it was described in the article I read, and I mean, what a description. If you get oozed on by the arch, apparently you will soon be the one needing a spot to be buried. I don't know what the sticky rust-colored ooze could be coming from a stone arch, other than some powerful supernatural stuff, so I think I'll definitely never be going there ever at all. At number 4, the Grove Park Inn. Considered the frightful jewel of the haunted Asheville, North Carolina, the Grove Park Inn has one guest that requires no checkout. The most famous apparition is called the Pink Lady. Although the ghost remains unidentified, it's believed that she was a young woman who fell 5 stories from room 545 to the Palm Court atrium back in 1920. According to the many stories of guests encountering the Pink Lady, it seems to me she's not a shy girl. One contractor who was repairing the room felt a presence. This gave him the chills, but his last straw was when he felt a tugging on his ear. Apparently he ran out of the room scared and never returned. Now that construction worker knows what's up. Any character in a horror movie needs to be more like him. Since then, many guests have reported encounters with the Pink Lady, most of which involve being touched by her. Oh, so the Grove Park Inn can quite literally make my nightmares come true. The general consensus seems to be that she is gentle, but I don't know, gentle or not, she's still a ghost touching me. Number 3, the Biltmore Estate. After a young George Washington Vanderbilt visited Asheville, North Carolina, his mother fell in love with the surrounding mountains. The historic estate was then built in the late 1800s on approximately 125,000 acres of land purchased by Vanderbilt. He established an impressive art and artifact collection and a library full of rare editions. In 1914 he passed, and his grandsons immediately inherited the estate, which they then turned into a tourist attraction. During his life, Vanderbilt loved to spend time in his Biltmore library when storms rolled in, and apparently he continues to enjoy it in his afterlife. Visitors of the estate have reported seeing a shadowy figure in the room when the weather turns gloomy. Even as a ghost, he still had style. Only coming out in the gloomy weather adds to the spookiness of it all. He's not the only one who still enjoys the house. The ghost of his wife Edith is also known to visit her husband there, with many guests reporting hearing her whisper George. Staff members have also said that the Biltmore Library is one of the most haunted places in all of North Carolina. They've heard eerie sounds of a party with clinking glasses, laughter, and echoing music. I personally try to avoid ghost parties, but it's good to know where not to go. Number 2, Teach's Hole. This haunted spot is located in the Outer Banks of North Carolina on Ocracoke Island, which is riddled with spooky stories. The most famous one, however, is Teach's Hole. Ocracoke Island was the home and the final resting place, kind of the pirate Blackbeard, whose real name was Edward Teach. He was known as a great intimidator, leading people to raise their white flags just at the sight of him. Teach did eventually hang up his pirate hat and pledge allegiance to the Queen, but in 1718 he was beheaded by Lieutenant Robert Maynard of the British Royal Navy. Maynard was sent by the governor of Virginia, who was not convinced the famous pirate was really willing to give up the criminal lifestyle. Now it is said that Blackbeard haunts the land near where his body was tossed into the sea, also known as the Point. People have reported seeing Blackbeard pacing the shoreline looking for his missing head. And at number 1, Lydia's Bridge. Every article I read about Lydia's Bridge started out with, if you grew up in Jamestown, you know the story of Lydia. After reading the story, yeah, how could you not know about it? It's horrifying. So the story goes that a pretty hitchhiker in a white dress flags drivers down near the old Jamestown Bridge and then asks for a ride. Now the first time I read this, I thought it was the lore of how the woman passed, but no, the hitchhiker that asks for a ride is the ghost. Apparently she quietly gets into their cars, tells them to take her home, and then vanishes. Are you kidding me? If I picked up a hitchhiker that turned out to be a ghost, I'd be out. Absolutely not. The spirit known as Lydia has been spotted on rainy, foggy nights as she walks alone or stands beside the road searching for help. The ghost is believed to be that of a young woman who passed away in a tragic car accident at the bridge many decades ago. The most commonly told story of Lydia's passing is that the fatal car accident occurred when a boy and a girl drove to a dance, maybe even the prom, on a rainy night. But sorry Lydia, I don't have room for another passenger.